The Hoteps are still mad at you?
The Hoteps are still mad at me. It's a Hotep coalition at this point on Instagram, and it's a different Hotep that will send a message each time because I told them that a black woman did not write the Matrix or the Terminator.
Not gonna lie, I heard that too. I heard that too. I wouldn't fight for it, but I did hear that
like
too.
Like 15 years ago, you heard it, right?
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you saw the stuff that proved it wasn't true, and you were like, "Oh, that's not true."
Actually, I didn't even care that much.
You were just kind of like, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Little fun fact.
These people are highly upset with me about this, and I don't know who pisses those people off more, me or Pascal.
Hard to know.
Hard to know. We should take a survey of who pisses off Hoteps more.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll see what the Israelites have to say. Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. Thank you all for joining us. Before we start, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you are alerted whenever we go live. We're constantly adding cross streams with other channels and adding new shows. Speaking of shows, it's the last Wednesday of the month, so it's time for us to do another Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert. This one is sure to be a spicy one since he's going to be pointing his vitriol at the legacy of Black fraternities. If you want to be a part of the show and call in or have your questions read on air, there's only one way, and that's become a patron. We do air the show at 6 p.m., but it goes live for patrons only at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and that is where you can interact with Brother Robert. Let me bring in my homie, my dog, the man of the Mau Mau Hour, Pascal Robert, tell us a little bit more about what he has planned. Also, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, Pascal was a guest on the American Prestige Pod with Daniel Bessner and Derek Davidson, where he gave a brief, uninterrupted history of Haiti, contemporary Haiti, and the situation right now, post-assassination of Jovenel Moïse. Please welcome Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. Peace and greetings, M2 Son. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jason, my man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hello, M2 Son.
It wasn't time to bring her in yet. You didn't even read the script.
I have the script in front of me. You confused me.
Oh, don't cry.
There's timing to this. You're ruining the timing.
I just said peace and greetings, M2 Son.
You weren't supposed to. She's not supposed to be here physically until the introduction.
Okay.
This is why I don't.
Well, in terms of the topic for tomorrow's Mau Mau Hour, we're going to be looking about the legacy of Black fraternities and sororities, class, politics, and their social role as creating the institutional mechanism for the petit bourgeois buffer class in black politics. So we're going to have Jeff Kennedy as our guest. So the subject matter is going to be class, color, eugenics, and black fraternities and sororities.
There's a eugenic aspect to black fraternities?
Very much so.
Is it a color thing?
No, it's many of their early members were major sponsors of eugenics.
So it has nothing to do with hair texture?
No, except maybe they like certain kind of combs.
What kinds would those be, Pascal, since you were in a fraternity yourself?
The bigger, wider kinds that are not
bigger, wider kind for, because that's not really a black,
more flowy hair.
Good hair is what you're saying.
I don't want to go into that trope.
Oh, now it's a trope.
The terminology is a bit of a trope. Can hair be good?
Is there a hot comb in your house, Pascal?
No, I haven't had a hot comb.
Pressing iron, maybe?
No.
Now, one person in the house has a relaxer?
No. Listen, I have family members who definitely got that chemical in the hair.
Partake.
Did you yell at them like Larry Fishburne's character in School Days?
Wake up! No. I will not come between a black woman and her perm. I will not defy the sacred space between a black woman and her perm.
Is that a sacred space too, son?
For some, yes, absolutely. Quite sacred.
Have you ever had a relaxer or a perm or anything in your hair?
I did. It was brief and I was not very good at it.
Did you forget the neutralizing shampoo and it all fell out?
No, never, but my hair was always puffy. It was never straight.
Oh, okay. So we should call this Hot Comb Tuesday from now on? When it's all black people?
Hot Comb Tuesday. Oh my God. I'm seeing white people using hot combs now.
Are their necks all burned up?
No, they're not. I think it's wigs they're using it for.
Jacked up edges.
Ooh, Pascal's getting on the edges.
Got those. What's your name? What's your name? The black right winger.
Did you see what Born Center says? Jason knows he used to be a kitchen beautician. You leave my ability to give relaxers and fades alone.
Candace Owens level bad edges.
What you know about bad edges?
What you know about
Last time you had
Candace Owens used to have some horrible edges, man.
Fair enough.
What fixed her edges?
Oh, getting that good job with the Blaze, I think that's what it was.
White people money.
That husband, that trust fund husband of hers.
What fixed Candace Owens' edges? White people money.
It is. It's true.
She used to have some rough edges.
Oh, you guys are so mean. You guys are so mean. Well, look, I would like to bring in the faceless voice of reason, producer extraordinaire, M. Toussaint. How are you, Toussaint? Are you excited about the show tonight?
I am very excited about the show tonight. Go ahead. It's been 13 years in the making.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. I know, right? Don't drop the baby.
Were you worried when everybody came in late and then the two other black dudes came in like Eddie Kane from the 5 Heartbeats?
Strutting in.
Pascal and our guest. We can see our guest in the virtual green room. And he's like, peace. He's like, I ain't never doing a black show again.
Never.
Negroes is late. The edges is bad. This is nothing good can happen from working with black people. That's not true. Pascal.
Yes.
You're a big fan of Killer Mike. Did you ever see his show when he was trying to buy everything?
When did I ever become a fan of Killer Mike?
He's a very good entertainer. I can like his music, and I don't have to care about what he says politically.
Some of his music is interesting.
Did you ever watch his show Triggered, where he tried to buy everything black?
No.
Because he was trying to keep his black dollar circulating blackly. Is that how that works?
Oh yeah, it's supposed to flip over in the black community.
Yeah, like if you hand a black guy $1, then he'll turn it into 10. Something like that. No, that's not how it works.
Black guy, he's supposed to hand it to another black guy.
Oh, but does he fish for a lifetime? What happens to handing him $1? I'm so confused.
Does he fish for a lifetime?
Hand a black man $1.
He'll fish for a lifetime, even though you never taught him how. Just fishing away.
That's not how that works.
I don't know, man. He's supposed to do it 11 times, I think.
You hand it to him 11 times, the same $1?
Yeah.
What happens on the 11th time? He gets it?
On the 11th time, he can give it to another community.
Is it on the fishing line? And you're like, whoa.
Whoa. Pull that back.
Messed up things you do. Anyway, I was also a guest on Billy Bunton's How Billy Sees It last night, where Billy got me to tear up a bit. The show got deep, as these conversations sometimes do. Before we bring in our guest, MT, you want to prepare the audience for what we're about to see tonight? Because I'm a little, not worried, but, religious topics can be controversial to some.
I guess. I mean, come on, man. We grown. Like, it's okay.
Pascal, are you prepared? This is your faith we're talking about here.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Did you just have a stroke?
I said praise be to Allah.
Oh, okay. I never heard you talk like Gene Bajlan before. Sorry, that's a racist joke. What does Islam and environmentalism have to do with each other? To help us answer that question, we have Ibrahim Abdul-Matin. Ibrahim has over 20 years of experience in community organizing, government, and consulting. Ibrahim's issue areas of expertise are environmental justice and client adaptation. He's a skilled public speaker. We'll find that out today. Mediator and committed poet. Please welcome a very patient man, Ibrahim Abdul-Matin.
Y'all are special.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Ibrahim.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Already,
I'm very honored to be here. I love the I love the energy you guys have.
Well, we'll see how much you love us after the first question.
Great, love it. Bring it.
Alhamdulillah. I would like you to explain to the audience, if you can, what you mean by the Islamic concept, the world is a masjid, and define a masjid for us.
Well, the It's a very simple concept. In my book, I wrote a book called Green Deen, What Islam Teaches About Protecting the Planet. And one of the stories that I tell is of my father who brought us, we were living in New York City, and I lived in such a way that I thought the whole world was a city. Like I would look out my window and it was just endless buildings. And that's what I thought the world was. And I got to, I remember we went for a hike outside of the city. And I remember, and I would see my dad pray at home. I would see him pray at the masjid, which is a place like a church or a synagogue or a temple. It's just the main, place of gathering for the purpose of prayer and reflection and community for our faith. I am a New Yorker. And I remember my dad was like praying out, we were out in the open. And I was like, why are you praying? You only pray in very specific places. And he related to me the sort of one of the more important, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, where he said that anywhere you may be at the time of prostration, which means if it's a time of prayer, anywhere you may be is a place of prostration. Now, obviously, there's some caveats, right? Like if someone's urinating in a place, or if there's dog poop, or if there's toxic substances, which will round into the conversation we can have. If it's polluted, then it's not necessarily a good place for you to pray. And that's so the part of the ethic there is that the way you would treat a church, the way you would treat a mosque, the way you would treat your temple, the way you would treat a place where you meditate, the way you treat any place that's sacred to you, that's the whole world is sacred. Everything on the planet Earth is sacred. We should be able to go and pray anywhere. There was a time when they had, you guys might be too, I'm not sure of the ages here, but the 9/11 masjid, the 9/11 mosque was in downtown Manhattan. And people were really freaked out about it. It was just right after 9/11. People thought Muslims were going to take over and bomb people. And I remember saying to people, we don't need a masjid. We could pray in the street. And I said that to antagonize some back there, just get them in their feelings. But it's the truth. They old on this channel. That's funny. I'm checking out the comments on the side too. So anyway, so that's the bottom line. The sacredness of it in the entire earth. And so I think you don't actually have to be a person of faith to understand the sacredness of earth, right? If you are just a pure humanist, you actually understand that you come from this planet, or you relate to this planet. This planet is important for you. This is where you're from. You're not from Mars. You're not from Venus, as far as you know. You're from Earth. So it's an important place because everything comes from it. Everything, what was that famous quote? I forget his name. He said, everyone you've ever known, everyone you've ever seen, everything that has ever happened has happened here. So, the earth is a sacred place. And so that's really the core of that conversation.
Mashallah.
Why are we not treating the earth as it is a sacred place? I mean, the paper that you sent us to read, which also kind of dovetails into what you talk about with your book as well.
Yes, Reese, thank you.
Also, another person that's been on this show, Andres Malm. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Andres Malm. He lives in some Nordic country where they have everything taken care of. Right. I say that because we're friends with Andres. But when we think about zoonotic diseases, these are a byproduct of deforestation, and this is a very serious problem, and I think most people are ignoring, as the pandemic for many is over. Inverted quotes. No one likes to talk too much about these future pandemics, and we will be seeing more because of deforestation.
I mean, I'm trying to balance my thoughts, because I think when I think about our responsibility with just basic land management, You guys still there? Yeah, you guys are still there. With just basic land management, I think so this is where I'll share a bit of the Islamic framework, where in Islam, you can't just like destroy everything and extract everything out of the ground and then not leave it better than you found it. Traditionally and legally, you have to set aside land for people to hunt and fish. You have to set aside land for people to live and sort of grow things. And you have to set aside land that's just left alone, that no one can touch. And you have to, like, that's part of the dynamic. So the traditional, like, in a traditional Muslim urban planning was organized in such a way, right? And if you had some, and this is where it's interesting, and I wonder from the communists on here, including my wife, who's I think has joined in and listening, but she's also a straight up communist or Marxist, however you want to frame it.
Is she going to yell at us?
No, I mean, she might.
Oh, damn.
She might if you're not on point.
Jesus Christ. What in the Stalin is going on in your house?
Alhamdulillah, he's got a Muslim wife who's has Marxist inclinations.
Yeah,
I
think the whole chat just they're just like their ears puckered up because I think everybody thought this was going to be a sermon. So
no, definitely not a sermon.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. But just the idea that you for the greater good, for the good of everyone, we have a lot. This idea, capitalism has created this notion that there's scarcity, that there's not enough land, there's not enough food, there's not enough animals, there's not enough air, there's not enough love, there's not enough homes, right? And so we've bought into that idea that there's not enough. But in actuality, we have plenty for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make a decision. It's just like in a pandemic, in the lockdown version of the pandemic. Some schools, if you have school-age children, some schools made a decision that nobody was going to get sick. So that meant nobody was in school. Mm-hmm. Other people made a decision everyone was going to stay in the building. So then they made adjustments. Mm-hmm. Maybe they adapted and evolved differently over time. That's my opinion about how all the bounty in an Islamic context, all the bounty and all the good that God has given us on this earth, we can manage it so that all of us benefit. In many ways, a true sort of humanist, a true Muslim, someone who cares about other humans and other plant life and other animal life, would want the best for everyone around them. It's a sort of very community oriented. That's why, in traditional Islamic cultures, it was very much about village life, about people having skills and trades and people trading what they were good at and supporting each other. It's not highly selective, Sam. Not at all. Not highly selective at all.
Oh no. So the most dangerous thing you can do, brother,
dive in like that,
is read the chat. It's just
no. Look,
once you give it life, it consumes you.
You know what's funny? I'm from I grew up in the era when people used to be on at the tail end of like the soapbox preachers.
Yeah.
So I used to interact with the soapbox preachers. So I'm like, what? So let's go there. Let's do this. And you said it like you dropped the Hebrew Israelites.
Yes.
I'm like, let's have that conversation. But all that being said, I think that there's like the ideas of land management. So now you don't get rational, human-based, and like protection of plants and animals and humans, land management in any system that exists right now on the planet Earth. Capitalism doesn't provide that. Democracy doesn't provide that. Communism, as we understand it, is the closest to providing. Socialists are the closest to understanding that and moving that direction. So that's an interesting thread of a conversation. What religions do that? Christianity definitely doesn't provide that as an underpinning. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. Judaism doesn't. Judaism is very fickle in movement. And same thing with Islam. Islam is based on culture and based on other things. But at the core of Islam, from my understanding, my reading, you have a framework for how to manage land and organize land in a way that a lot of other traditions don't have. And I'll just add, most of our original traditions, right? If you were like the Haudenosaunee from upstate New York, the five tribes that had an incredible agreement. Other traditions all around the globe, wherever you're indigenous to, your people before colonialism, before capitalism, most likely had a better land management system than we have now.
Why is that?
Because they were trying to say, how do we support the most amount of people? How do we provide for everyone that we know, that we love? It wasn't at this insane scale. This scale that we're on now is a capitalism scale is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
An example of where Muslims go wrong, obviously UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, that whole area, right? It's not like Muslims are without fault in this, but an example where Muslims kind of did the right thing, even though it looks like they're the worst people in the world. Saddam Hussein he always made sure that people had access to clean water, even when he was doing all sorts of other stuff, because it's an Islamic framework that you can't charge for superfluous water, for extra water. You can't charge people for water like that. Water has to be provided for everyone. That's built into the religion. So tell me any other political ideology or religious framework that says that free water has to be built in and everyone has to have access. You can't find that.
I don't know if it's in the bylaws, but would you agree that Christianity, there's something inherent in its nature that if someone needed water, one would provide water to that person?
100%. 100%. The example of Jesus is 110%. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and that's where, that's why Christianity resonates in so many ways, because his example was astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Christianity didn't bring like a framework for how to manage the market. So, for example, in Islam, you have a framework where the marketplace is a place where you can't charge interest in the marketplace. You can't charge interest at all. And the principle behind that is you're not supposed to make money off of someone else's backs. So capitalism, as we see it, the way it's on steroids right now, is a result of people basically sitting fat and borrowing and other people's money and making money off of other people's money. This is an insane idea that was actually against the rules in Christianity until they were like, nah, we can make a lot of money.
Brother,
pretty dope.
Sheikh Ibrahim, I got to tell you right now, I'm really, really glad to have you on this show, because I'm going to tell you why. I, as someone who has many friends in the Muslim community in South Florida, I get so much grief from Muslims for doing this show. It was like, Astaghfirullah, brother Pascal is a communist. Communism is haram. Communism is haram, brother, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what about the interest on your house, brother? What about the fact that you got a 401(c)? Or what about the fact that your 401k has all this, you're buying cigarettes with your money? I mean, it's really ridiculous to me that when you look at the actual economic models that existed in the early times of Islam, according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, how Muslims today who are completely invested in the capitalist world system don't realize that according to Islamic Sharia and Islamic law, there is a cap on the percentage of profit you can make. You cannot make more than 33% profit on any endeavor. All natural resources are owned by the state. There is a waqf or trust that is required to be provided for the care of people if they have no income or wealth. Healthcare is provided. Islam as an economic model within the time of the Prophet Muhammad was clearly at best a socialist economic system. But yet Muslims have been so adapted to believing that capitalism is the way they go, maybe it's because they're buying into a Saudi Arabian narrative of Islam. When you talk about issues like we do on this show, it's like, brother, this is haram. How can you do this? I'd like you to speak to that, please.
I mean, there is a fundamental problem with socialism and communism. And I think this is my critique of all of these systems. I think that capitalism and socialism reduce human beings to units of production. That you're defined by what you can make or create or destroy. I think with a revealed system like Islam, or even any of the other systems like Buddhism, where you have enlightenment is the goal and where you annihilate yourself is the goal, the value you place on a person Within Islam, it's their understanding of themselves, and their relationship to the creator of the universe. Within a tradition like Buddhism or Hinduism, it's your ability to transcend this reality, and you're closer to that ability to do that means that you are a better person, that you are a higher value, or you're better than the next person who may not be able to do that. So I think the fundamental problem with the man-made systems like socialism, capitalism, is that they're stuck within this sort of production extraction framework. Now, my wife would disagree with me on that and say that part of what we're supposed to do is it's like maximum cooperation, right? And how do you make sure that everyone has? So not that it's great that someone can walk their children to school, and the school is a good school and it's a healthy environment. And someone's like, wow, I live a great life. I can just stroll to school. Well, I think that so she would say everyone should be able to do that, as opposed to dividing it up and saying these people can and these people can't. And that's the more important thing to focus on. If I'm not, so I think that's kind of but for me, it's not actually that piece around what's my value and how I define my value. I still think that there's a fundamental flaw of communism and socialism. I do also have I'm not really all about these European cats and some stuff they wrote down back in the day. I struggle with that, and so I'm always like, well, what are the other systems that people have done in the past? That's why actually I think just because a system isn't Islam doesn't mean that it's haram. That's my opinion.
I agree with
right?
that.
And also for example, the Haudenosaunee, the 5 Iroquois nations, 5 tribes in upstate New York, they made an agreement based on they were in a time of warfare, and they made an agreement around peace. And it took a lot of effort, but they finally did it. And then part of that peace, that organization, was if they were going to go to war, or if they were going to be angry or like do something violent, they had to go to first. The warriors still had their role. They would have to go to a council of grandmothers first. And that council of grandmothers would assess the good or bad. So I think that's there's interesting models in other spaces that you can't just say that's totally wrong. It might be an interesting thing to learn from and to incorporate and to make our systems better now. The last note that I'll make is that socialism had its way in the Arab world. That was a big part of the Saddam Hussein's and the
Ba'athist movement.
The Ba'athist movement, exactly. So like there's a lot of backstory there, and a lot of times Muslims will say, "Oh, they left their religion," and I think that that's part of what people are sort of dealing with when they're sort of reactively saying, "No, it's bad." Like we already went down that route. We can't do that anymore. So it may not necessarily be based on any of the actual ideas. It might just be based on people's bad experiences.
Tucson, did you want to add something?
I did. Maybe a slight pivot in a different direction.
Yeah, I expected you to.
Sure. Well, speaking of the idea of no, that's bad, there's apparently a contradiction in Christianity with science, some kind of antagonism there. But no such antagonism exists with Islam. So can you talk to us about that a little bit? Islam's relationship to science and how that relates to environmentalism.
Yeah, I think Islam has a beautiful. It's similar to someone like Einstein when he would be, he was a very faithful person, and his approach to being a faithful person meant that his study of what God has created was a form of worship for him. So instead of it being, and so this is the important piece. You have all these like Descartes and all these very traditional sort of natural philosophers. Natural philosophy was the term about what science was before it became science. Natural philosophy, most of those folks were like translators, and they were trying to talk about um, these new ideas grounded in their sort of Christian, framing, because the people they were talking to back then were mostly Christian, so they were trying to justify their enlightened ideas. Enlightened. The problem with a lot of what they discovered was that if they could not see something with their own eyes, if they could not observe it, then it wasn't true. They didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
That idea, that kernel of an idea, has sort of threaded it into all of these different traditions where, like a scientific approach, where people are always looking for the beginning of something. They're always looking to see and observe how it started, right? Where does the universe, where did it start? Who was the first human? I have to know. We have to solve this mystery. Islam is like, okay, we kind of know that. We get that. We know the beginning of stuff. We're not tripping about that. What we are actually more interested in is, how does it work? How does it work, and what like sort of thing has God layered into this plant or into these oceans or into the sky, so I can be a better human being on this planet, and so I can take care of it. And it's not, so like that's our function. We have to maintain the balance in the planet. It's called mizan. We have to maintain the delicate balance that keeps all life humming and alive. So science is not about discovery of what's possible per se. It's more of deep understanding of what is in nature already. And then from that context, then you get to a couple of juncture points. It's when you discover some way to do something, because there's always unintended things that happen with science. Let's say you discover gunpowder, or you discover nuclear weapons, right? Things that could destroy lots of people. You discover birth control pills, and then you do what America did, and they just lie to thousands of Puerto Rican women and give them to them, right? When you discover things, you're like, ooh, what can we do with this? Then you start to, there's a twisted evil side of science. And in Islam, well, the junction point will say, well, if it's harmful, should we be doing it? No.
Mm-hmm.
So then stop it. So I think in many ways, we're on this like crazy, like European bender right now, right? They're like, it's like Old Dirty Bastard, but a white European dude with like white stuff all around his nose. and we're just like, oh, look what I can do. I can go to space. Really? Is that what we should be doing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love space for like the rest of them, but and for the flat earthers there, I'm sorry, I'm not on that. But first, we should go to the ocean first. Let's see if we know everything about everything on the planet Earth. Then maybe we could go to space. So it's like really like I'm actually on the board of the Union of Concerned Scientists. It's an organization that does advocacy around science and research around nuclear disarmament and climate change and other issues. A lot of reports and papers, but I also advise them and say, listen, what are the ethical questions that come up with science? And how do we communicate and talk about those ethical questions and not get down the trap of, ooh, but we could try it. You saw those ads that were they were out there. There were some people lauding them and some people were showing them as the end of times, the ecto life. Did you guys see that?
Mm-mm. No.
It's like where you could grow a baby basically in like a little tiny incubator that you could bring home.
Wow.
It's like a basically like Matrix kind of setup.
Wow.
You like artificial amniotic fluid and everything. And so like is that just because we can do that? Is that good? Just because we can bomb people, is that good? Like every military device that has ever been created from the beginning of time to this moment now was absolutely useless against the pandemic. No bomb, no missile, no gun, no atomic, nothing could have stopped that little tiny virus from killing us. So where's our priorities? The United States has 900 bases around the globe. And a lot of that is because we're exploring things and discovering things. And we're using because we can. That sort of logic of, because we can do it is really dangerous.
We have a super chat I'm gonna pop it up on the screen. Borhav wants to know: can Ibrahim please describe Islam's position on vegetarianism and or animal rights?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting, beautiful stories about people during the Prophet's time, so tell them where he, where, example, someone saw someone fed a dirty old dog some water out of their shoe, and from a well, and it was understood that that person was paradise, go to heaven just demonstrating that we should be taking care of animals. Basic idea. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he did not eat meat inside of his home. He was essentially a vegetarian in his own house. And he ate meat that was offered to him as a blessing, like as a gift. He wasn't like, no, I don't eat meat, I'm a vegetarian. He was like, you're offering me meat, this meat, I'm going to eat it. He wouldn't eat what was prohibited, like pork or other things, but he would eat things that were permissible, and he would eat them in that context. But he's sorry. So that's an important thing for us. I think the way that Muslims ate, and traditionally Muslims eat, is that you don't eat a lot of meat, right? Mm-hmm. So your understanding of there's a lot of intention that goes into slaughtering an animal and how it's raised and how it's treated, right? You don't want to treat your animal bad and then eat. You don't want to shock it with electricity. You don't want to shoot it in the head. There's a certain process to it, which is very similar to like Native American or even Mongolian sort of just the reverence and the respect for the animal as part of this larger web of life, and that you're part of it is with them. So there's so that's that. I will say there's an argument right now, not a religious argument, but an environmental argument that's rooted in our faith to being a vegetarian today. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think that we should eat a lot less meat, dramatically less, and we should know where our animal comes from, and we should have a relationship with the land where that animal comes from, and that should be the framework that you should operate upon eating meat. And that is the halal Islamic, like tell you the framework around how animals are treated is built into the faith. So that's another aspect of it that I think is relevant.
Pascal, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the role of tahara, purification, the use of wudu, and its importance to the Muslim and the Muslim body, and how that relates to environmental concerns as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I every faith has some kind of water ritual, so I think that there's something really powerful about that. It's not too much you can say. I think one of the things that's important about wudu, which is basically the ritual cleansing that you do before you pray, is that you, if you are even, there's a hadith, there's a saying that if you're even by a stream or a lake or a running stream, you should not waste water, even if you're there, even when you're making wudu. So there's never a justification to waste water. So I think that that's a really important thing. And then around purification, if you don't have water, you can also use like clean stone or dirt or a tree, which also says and implies that the things in nature are actually already purified.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, as a Muslim, these ideals, which are very much in line with what were actually brought forth during the period of revelation in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, number one, how do you think the Muslim world lost its way in its ability to implement those things effectively? And what things can be done to bring back that original understanding of the faith relevant to the environment and dealing with humanity and people overall?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the constant pressure from someone. I think someone had said in there I was getting deep state. I appreciated that comment in the thing, because there is a conspiracy theory bone in me. I think when Muslims started to sort of try and mimic Europeans, and that was sort of in the late 1700s, with the decline of the beginning of the decline of the 1800s, really, the decline of the Ottoman Empire. Because I mean, during the Ottoman Empire, just as an aside, the Holy Land, the Levant, those areas were Jews and Muslims and Christians and all sorts of people lived in perfectly fine harmony for a long period of time, hundreds of years under Muslim rule. It wasn't like we're Muslim and we're going to take over and we're going to kick everybody out. No, that's not how it went. In Iran, there was a huge Jewish population until the 50s, when the British and the Americans, did their colonial project around oil and extraction. So, Mossadegh, the democratically elected leader of Iran in the 1950s, that the American CIA and the British intelligence took out. These are just examples of the colonial project, and this is like the end stage of it that we're talking about. This project was a long-standing project, and 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, well, maybe now little over 100 years ago, the lines in that region were completely different. The Europeans have used a very clever tactic for so long, and that was divide and conquer. They did it first on themselves, then they did it next on West Africans, and then they did it also on Arabs and also South Asians. They would divide and conquer, and the physical representation of that divide and conquer is the lines that are drawn in the sand right now. Those are not lines that are relevant for the people there. Those are lines that are relevant for the people who wanted to control them and control the oil underneath their lands. Now, yeah, I think that's the core, is we lost our way when we tried to mimic, or we thought we were behind, and that's, we weren't. We were fine.
What do you think can be done to try to redirect course?
I think some people are doing it, right? Like in the United States, you have places like Zaytuna College that are sort of just focusing on Islamic scholarship and a very sort of like robust education that includes Islam, includes sciences, includes math. That's the sort of reality of the world, and so they're trying to prepare young people to be prepared for the world, but also be rooted in a really solid understanding of their faith. I think the models in Turkey, in Malaysia, in Indonesia are really robust models. There's like some really beautiful work that's happening in Yemen and in Jordan around permaculture techniques. So there's some really interesting stuff happening, I think, around the Muslim world in terms of like practical things. And then from a sort of spiritual perspective, again, we need to stop obsessing about what the people in the West are doing. I mean, that's the bottom line. So I think, that's the fun. If we're going to try and keep up with them, we will lose that race.
Well, I have a
question. You have any questions?
Okay. Sure, yeah. So I want to kind of turn the question around. So we have our title question: what does Islam have to teach us about environmentalism? I kind of want to talk about the relationship between Islam and leftism. So I thought it was interesting that in your book you included this quote, and I'll read it. The original Green Muslim in the United States, Saeed Hossein Nasser, I butchered that, I'm sorry, author of Men and Nature, The Spiritual Crisis in Modern Man, makes the following observation. As awareness of the environmental crisis has increased, numerous vocal groups and even political parties have sprung up to defend the environment. Until recently, however, most of these have had a leftist tendency with a tone decisively opposed to established religions, although this is now changing somewhat. While I have sought to convert the ecological movement into, while some have sought to convert the ecological movement into a religion in itself. So, what can you tell us about the relationship between, say, Christianity and environmentalism? I'm sorry, Christianity and leftism. Maybe it's an easier fit with Islam and leftism. Tell us all about your marriage, is what it's basically.
I mean, I get really I don't, the dichotomy is like a trap, I feel like. And we're stuck as like in like the ping pong of it. So it's hard for me to like lean in on that. I do think we need like fresh thinking. And hold on. I just have to respond to Sultan Menzuma. No, bro, you're wrong. You were totally wrong. I'm just gonna throw that out there. um, I think for our perspective, I think for us is like standing on the side of people who are not the oppressors, not the colonizers, not the controllers, not the dictators on the local level. So like, who's preventing people from getting access to housing? Who's preventing people from getting from feeling safe in their neighborhood? And it's generally not another criminal. It's usually a police officer. Who's preventing people from feeling like they can feel safe walking around in a community? Most of the time, that it's the the critics of those systems, of those authoritarian systems that we live in, are both left and right. The problem is that the right generally sees black and brown people, and this is why I always say this, is that Democrats, so to give you a sense of it, Republicans see black people as wild animals to be controlled. Democrats see black people as pets to be taken care of. So I'm not interested in any of that. And I think that we have to sort of create and build other types of solutions that aren't stuck within this dichotomy. Now, that being said, when people are just like, I hate you, okay, you hate me. So most likely I'm going to be with someone who doesn't hate me. So I generally think that is why there's much more traction between Islam and the left, particularly in the United States. It wasn't always this way. 9/11 happened and it shifted everything. Because before 9/11, it was much more leaning into the compassionate conservatism of George W. Bush. So we're not, I would say that Muslims are not all in on every aspect of the left project. Let's just put it that way. There's lots of things in the left that people are like, but we're not all in on the crazy right wing sort of thing. So if you're really a Muslim, you're sort of like, I'm gonna chill, sit back and take my popcorn out and watch this thing and try and fit in the best way possible.
Pascal?
Do you believe that there is a component of Islam that requires combating the forces of oppression, if at best with your words?
Yes.
And if not with your words, at least with actions.
Yeah. You have to. I mean, I tell my sons, like at the basic level, if someone's trying to, if there's a bully, and you see someone that's messing with someone in your friend group, and the person's weaker or smaller, you have to step in and do something about it. And if that person's so big that you're afraid, well, stand in the middle and just deal with that and try and figure out what you're afraid of, but also know that person is getting their back. Like had the smaller person or the person that's afraid, you can be together. Now you're together. Now you're united. Get some other people, then you'll be more. There'll be numbers, right? You have to always be that person who stands up for the oppressed. You have to. That is like to me, like, and I think that is baked into a young person, and that's why I teach my sons that. I think that that's like an ethic that is deeply Islamic, that has to be. You have to do it. You can't just say, "Oh, that's what we're supposed to do." No, you have to actually do it. And that's why the hadith that you were referencing were saying, if you see evil, you see things that are unjust, you know, do something with your hands to change it. If you can't do that and it's not safe, do something with you say something against it. If you can't do that and it's not safe, hate it in your heart. And that's the least good thing.
Yeah, indeed. Do you feel that the Muslim communities in the West, particularly the United States, have effectively taken on that obligation? Do you think there's a lack of willingness to engage in political phenomenon that would require or that would allow them to more effectively deal with neutralizing forces of oppression? In other words, do you feel that there is a certain amount of reticence on the part of Muslim communities to engage politically in more effectively dynamic and radical ways?
I would say that we've regressed. Right. Today is the anniversary of Malcolm X being murdered at the Audubon Ballroom. Right. So we came out the gate with that, with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, people that were really all about it. And since then, we've sort of like slinked into the shadows a little bit. But that's the core of who we are, I think.
Again, what steps do you think can be taken to change that?
I'm not a big macro person. You know, I think that we're in a different time frame. There's an organization in Chicago called Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network. I think they have a Chicago office, Atlanta, and DC, and they do really good, really rooted programming. They also like the Ummah Free Clinic in LA, where they started they after the riots in South Central back in the day, they built a clinic. Muslim doctors came together and built a clinic to provide free healthcare. Iman also has a free healthcare clinic in its sites, in its locations. So I think part of it is like meeting people where they're at, and that's where, and we as Muslims have to be more in a place of service. So that's, like we have to do that for a long time, and also being supportive of other people's struggles for a long time, not just complaining about Islamophobia, not just whining, but stepping up and being like, hey, we got you. We're supporting you.
Do you think that there is a conflict that exists in particularly the West between immigrant Muslims and Muslims who convert in the West over certain tactical dynamics, cultural issues, or racial issues that brings forth conflict?
I mean, that's a loaded question. Of course there is. There's tons of conflict. But there's also conflict within all those groups in and of themselves. The immigrants that came to the United States, mostly Arab, South Asian, from other places, they came here to make money. The most of the Muslims that are from the United States that were Muslim here are African American primarily, traditionally. We came here various different ways, whether we were descendant of slaves or we were folks, from the Caribbean, and then they moved here, still descendant of slaves, but still made an independent choice to move here. African descent folks that came later in like the 70s and 80s, different waves of Black Americans, of Black Muslims in the United States. I would say by and large, the dividing is like the people who came here for economic means or to make money, basically, to get theirs. I think that's where there's like a sort of a tension, because they're not trying to like really, they're just trying to get theirs. They're not trying to like make the system run better or make people have better lives per se. They're trying to make sure that their family does well. And you know what? They might bounce at a certain point because they have a home to go back to.
Tucson, you have any questions?
Sure. Well, I just want to say I saw someone in the chat much earlier on mention that religion and politics shouldn't go together. But I think you and I are joined in not imagining, or well, imagining a kind of different category for environmentalism. I think you and I both see it as something everyone has a stake in. And your book is just outlining why you feel Islam or Muslims have a stake in it. Um, well, how do you imagine environmentalism? Oh, I think we've got some technical difficulties. Deep state,
I'm here.
deep
I'm here.
state
I just,
through. Okay.
I, um, I, to me, I think of things in terms of water, waste, energy, and food. I think of things in terms of like simple, persistent human problems. So if you took an ancient human and brought them into the present, they would have to go to the bathroom. They would have to drink some water. They'd want a place to sleep. They need some clothes. They might be cold. They might be warm. They might, like they'd have some needs. These are problems that we've had for the beginning of time and will continue to have for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I call them persistent human problems. So really solving these problems at scale is what I think about. At the population scale, that's how you get population level decisions, right? So instead of everyone individually drilling a water well in a place like Queens or in a place like Richmond, Virginia, you can't have everyone drilling a water well because then you're going to deplete the water table beneath you. No, you find a place outside of the city. You find a place that you can make sure that everyone can have water, that everyone can equally share in that benefit because we're all trying to solve the same problems. So to me, it's looking at each of these problems in that same way. So it's not just like, oh, I want to be able to get whatever I want to eat whenever I want to eat it. No, it's like, what are we making in our bioregion that is fresh, that is relevant, that is now, that is from a local farmer? And how do we support those farmers so that we stop creating these weird economies of people going all over the globe and supply chains that are completely impossible? Everyone should be within a regional supply chain that provides all of our needs, and we could do that. And I think that that's the framework that we need to go to instead of the nation state, instead of city states, or instead of like I'm a Fulani, or I'm a Igbo, or I'm a German, and these are the lines of the people that speak my language. Those things are silly. I think all these lines are silly based on all these silly ideas. It's not actually solving human problems. So that's my opinion about like a future state or sort of a North Star to get to.
Do you feel like we've answered the question tonight? What does Islam have to teach us about environmentalism? In 1 hour? I think we've given a taste of it. Should definitely check out the book.
It's like any person who's a religious person or studied or been in any tradition, knowledge of this type is like an ocean, and what we've given is like a drop of that ocean. So you should dive in and discover for yourself what makes sense for you. Some folks on here are not religious at all. I'll give you my reason why I am, and I'll just give that context that I believe Islam gives a framework for making difficult decisions. How do you, like, at different juncture points in your life? When I was early in college, I started studying other faiths and said, with that framework, how do you make what's the best system for making difficult decisions? And you, as a person, find those systems for yourself. The beautiful way that we interact as governments and societies is that we respect each other's differences, but we all know that we need to provide resources for everyone. When we get to the scarcity mindset, when we want to hoard things, that's the big problem. And the problem that we have is this entire country that we live in, United States of America, was based off of angry white men doing whatever they wanted, however they wanted, whenever they wanted. And we keep trying to compete with them for this idea of freedom. We'll never win that argument. We will never win against them on that. So part of the faith aspect to it is it anchors you into like a value system so that you don't go off on that tangent of I can do whatever I want. No, the boundaries are there. The boundaries are everyone has to benefit, and you have to not destroy the planet in the process. So what does that look like?
That's a go ahead.
I was about to say, alhamdulillah, I really appreciate you coming on, Sheikh Ibrahim, and really laying out the Islamic position on not only environmentalism, but a few other very, very complicated issues and positions. And I've been actually telling the staff here that I've been wanting to get a Sheikh or an Imam to come on the show to ask the question, what is the revolutionary capacity of Islam in the Western world? But I have an Imam, my personal teacher was Imam Rafiq Makki. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but if you want to come on and address that question, or if you know a Sheikh or Islamic scholar who you think will be good that we could get on, we definitely.
I have someone I would be intriguing to think about. This guy Shadi Al-Masri in New Jersey. He may not vibe with all of your audience. He's a very knowledgeable and very I'm curious what he would say. I do think that revolution has to happen in this context. You're not gonna, I started this conversation talking about land and how we organize land, and if you the way things are trending, no one's gonna have any land,
right?
And we're ripping away soil that's arable soil that's usable. So I think you need to have something dramatic may need to happen.
Toussaint?
Well, we are headed in the direction of something dramatic happening. That is for sure.
That is true.
Will you be joining us in the champagne room? Oh, I'm sorry. It's the non-alcoholic champagne room. It's the bathhouse.
It's the bathhouse tonight. Will you be joining us in the bathhouse?
I think I'm not going to join you in the bathhouse.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate this. Toussaint, do you have any parting words before we wrap up?
This conversation, 13 years in the making. I'm so glad. Running my blog so fresh and serene when I came across your book, and I've been intrigued ever since. So glad we were able to make this happen. Shout out to your wife, Comrade Matin. She's great. And I feel like we answered the question.
I'll say one thing real quick. Her name is Fatima Ashraf.
Okay.
She is like, it's really hard for her to be in this capitalist context because she is not of this system.
Yeah.
And she gets the faults. And so I think what she's doing is really raising our children, as am I, with this sort of like razor sharp perspective. Like you're looking at things. We don't celebrate Halloween for two reasons: because it's capitalist and consumerist, and because it's not our religion.
You just don't want the kids to have candy. Just admit. You just you and Mrs. Grinch don't want them kids to have candy.
You know what that is? Because candy was the first cocaine.
Candy was the first cocaine. Well, my son thinks he's Pablo Escobar during Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
He's sitting there with a whole bunch of candy. The world is mine.
I think that was the third really clever use of cocaine in a conversation about religion and the environment, and I've never done that. So kudos to you guys for facilitating.
I'm looking at my 4-year-old son right now as he's eating a pizza roll, talking about the chocolate hearts that he got for Valentine's Day. So you might be onto something with your candy.
No, they're locked in. That's what it's about. That was the whole hustle. Oh, we're gonna get this sugar. Oh, we got this sugar. We got this plantation. I got 300 Negroes. we got this. We got this.
That's
And
what
then
my
they just
son
start-
says to his friend in the sandbox. We're gonna get this sugar.
We gonna get this sugar. And then they spoon feed it. So I'm like, nah, we ain't having none of that. So that's the dynamic, you know, like we're all in partnership with people. So the people you should partner up with should be people that you're willing to, you know, ride with if this thing goes about, you know, to revolution, basically. That's the vibe.
Well, thank you,
That's
brother,
the
very
vibe.
much, brother Ibrahim. And we
All right, God bless you.
are
Out.
Out.